Good morning, everybody. We are about to start our first live session of this crowd coding experiment. We wait just a couple of minutes to allow other people to connect. Good morning. We are here because today is the first day of Code Week, the edition of Code Week 2014. This year, Code Week ambassadors have decided to launch a crowd coding experiment aimed at the development of a flagship game. Flagship game is a game that does not exist yet, because it is assumed to be developed during Code Week by a crowd of people possibly taking part in the experiment. And I hope that many of you will actively take part in this experiment and have their name published in the list of developers of Flagship. Today, we start by presenting the specifications of the game, because the specifications were not disclosed so far. So this is a first part of this meeting in which I will present in detail the specification, and then right after the presentation of the specification, we will start together a live coding session in which we will try to provide a first cut implementation of the game. Needless to say, developing a full-fledged game will take longer than just 1 hour. So at the end of the presentation, we will have just time to start developing it. And then during the entire week, there will be live coding sessions in which all other components of the application will be developed. So this is just the first one of what I called like a relay race, in the sense that there will be many coding sessions taking place during Code Week and possibly involving other countries. So right now I'm speaking from the University of Urbino in Italy. I hope that many countries will take part in the experiment. They can do it either by participating to events possibly coordinated and promoted by Code Week ambassadors, by local Code Week ambassadors, or they can do it by themselves. Even individuals can individually take part in the experiment in many different ways that will be illustrated during this presentation. Then everything will be wrapped up in Rome on October the 16th, and the Code Week edition of the flagship game will be officially released by Neely Cruz. So let's start with the specification. So here you can find my name. I'm a Code Week ambassador for Italy, and this is the link of the School of Information Science and Technology I belong to in Urbino. So what's crowd coding? Crowd coding means that we want as many people as possible to take part in the development of this application. To this purpose, the specification of the application will be completely disclosed and then published online. There will be live coding sessions taking place all over the Code Week, and all coding sessions will be based on App Inventor. App Inventor is a visual programming tool made available in cloud by MIT. And we decided to use it because it does not require previous knowledge of any programming language. So it is very intuitive and it allows you to be immediately productive in writing code. So we will code together in App Inventor, and following the live coding sessions and possibly the video logs and the video tutorials, you will not only take part in this experiment, but also familiarize with App Inventor in order to be able afterwards to develop your own applications on this environment. Then during Code Week, we will also release on Google Play all the improvements. So there will be incremental releases of the application on Google Play in order to allow everybody to possibly install the very preliminary versions of the applications on their own devices and start playing with it, familiarizing with the application, providing feedback, comments, and also watch an application take shape in their own hands, in the sense that we will start with the very first version of the application, which is an application that does nothing. This application is already on Google Play Store. You are warmly invited to download it, install it on your device, and possibly provide feedbacks, comments, suggestions on how to improve it and how to implement, starting from this as a basis, the specifications that I will show right now. Then Code Week edition of Android will be developed in just 1 week, actually in less than 1 week, because we will release it on the 16th. At each step, we will release not only the actual result of our coding session, but also the source files, which are the project files of App Inventor, the extensions of which is .aia. So all these files will be made available online in order to allow you not only to take part in this experiment, but also possibly develop in parallel your own version of the application following the specification. Then it will also be made available, the specification, after Code Week, in order to allow possibly third parties to develop their own versions and to possibly put them on Google Play Store, or even develop portings for other platforms, because with App Inventor, we will first of all develop the application for Android devices. But we can target any other kind of devices, and you are invited to do it by yourselves and possibly make them available. Notice also that compliance of your own versions of the application with the specification will be checked. This means that a compliance checking service will be made available in order to allow you to officially register your own versions of the game and have them listed on the official website. After this week, we will also publish the list of all people who contributed to some extent to the development of the application by taking part in the crowd coding experiment. And I will show you how to have your name listed among the contributors. And then once the game has been completely developed, it will be available for playing with it. And since it is, as you will see in a moment, a very challenging game, contests will be opened in order to find out which is the best score that you will be able to achieve in a pretty short time. Okay, let's start with the disclosure of the specification. So first of all, the name. The name of the game is Flagship, but this is not the only name that you can use for your own versions of the application. The only constraint is that the name of the app must contain Flagship. The other constraint is that any application which pretend to be an implementation of this specification has to contain a reference to the official website, which is http://flagshipgame.eu. Then there is a cover screen, the first screen that shows up when you launch the application. There are basically no constraints for the screen, so you can personalize it as you prefer. But on the other hand, we need this screen to contain two buttons or two links. one for configurations and the other one for starting the game. So if you want, you can even use the default buttons of the target platform, like Android device, for instance, to gain access to the configuration page where the user can set his or her own preferences, while we need for sure a play button to be present in this page. But there are no other constraints, so feel free to play with this first screen as you prefer to personalize your own version of the application. Okay, now we are really start speaking about the specification of the game. The game that we are going to implement is a flag sorting games. This means that the game will have to do with flags, and the name flagship is not just a casual name, and we will have to sort the flags according to a given sorting criterion. Sorting criteria will be then extended and possibly contributed by other people in many different ways, as I will explain in a moment. So the game will present 16 flags at a time, randomly taken from a larger set, possibly a much larger set, and the flags, the 16 flags selected for a match, are placed in a random position on a 4x4 grid. Then the player is challenged to tap the flags in the proper order according to the given sorting criterion, which is the challenge. So this is a mock-up to show you how the game can look like. As you can see, I represented a grid, a 4x4 grid with 16 flags in it. And there is also a position here in which the challenge is announced. Then there are many other elements in this page that will be discussed later on, but notice also that this is not part of the specification. The specification is written here. So this means that in order to develop your own version compliant with this specification, you do not need to have the layout to look exactly as the one that I am showing in the mockup. This is the one that I will try to implement together with you during Code Week for the Code Week release that will be released on the 16th. But then you are able to personalize your own version of the application, even by changing the look and feel of this page. So for a given sorting criterion, and notice that the sorting criterion used as a default for the development will be the alphabetical order of the English name of the flag, of the countries the flag belongs to. As I was saying, the sorting criteria is announced here. Then there is the grid, which shows the 16 flags that will be used to play this particular match. They will be placed in random positions in the grid, and the challenge is to tap the flags in the proper order in a minimum amount of time according to the sorting criterion proposed. So the grid has just a very simple requirements. It must take a square region of the screen. The entire area taken by a flag must be sensitive to the tap. So this means that the user can tap it in any position which is covered by the flag in order for the tap to be properly registered by the application. And flags must be spaced in order to reduce the risk of false taps. This means that there will be some spacing between the flags, both vertically and horizontally. As for the challenge must be clearly declared in the same screen in which the game is played. So we cannot declare the challenge in another screen and then have the player play on this screen. So in this case, in this particular layout that I'm proposing, the challenge is announced here, and the plate is played here. Then we need the challenge not only to be declared, but we need also it to be explained. And to this purpose, the sorting criterion must be explained in another screen, and there could be a link in this page to the second screen, or otherwise standard buttons can be used to this purpose to allow the user to access additional information about the challenge. In particular, requirement information include the definition of the sorting criterion and also the source of data. Notice that apart from this case, which is alphabetical order, or all other sorting criteria will be numerical. So this means that we need to have numbers, to have real-world data, and such data have to be provided in a way that I will show later during this presentation. But this data, once have been collected, need also to refer to the original source in order to allow people to possibly verify them, and also we want the application to be informative, not to be misleading. So if we say that, for instance, the sorting criterion is population, we need real population numbers for all the countries which are represented by the flags. And those population data have to be taken from an official source, and in the game it must be declared also the reference year at which the data refer to. What is a correct tap? Well, first of all, the first tap is always correct. This means that the first flag that you tap is taken as the first flag in your sorting. So this means that you can take exactly the first flag in the global sorting of the 16 flags, and this is very good for you, but you can tap any other flag and it will be taken automatically as a starting point, meaning that later on you can just tap flags which follow according to the sorting criterion selected. So this means that the nth tap is correct if and only if the sorting parameter associated with it is greater or equal than that associated with the last tapped one. Okay, so we need only to enforce or to preserve the ordering among the flags that we are tapping, so we can skip some flags. At the nth correct tap, the number n is displayed over or near the tapped flag, and those are requirements. So this means that those are mandatory specifications for any one of you who want to implement his or her own version of the application. So if I tap here, for instance, this is Austria, then I can tap here, which is Finland, and those are both correct taps because they are in the proper order, even if between Austria and Finland there were other flags. Okay, and those are the numbers that will appear showing the order, the correct order in which those two flags have been tapped. Then there are wrong taps. So I can also tap on a flag which is not in the correct order. In particular, at each tap, the value of the parameter associated with the tapped flag is displayed, and this is displayed here at the top in order to allow people to learn from this application. In particular, assume that we do not know the flags, and I think that many of us do not know all the flags which are displayed at the moment. What happens is that by playing with this game, I will also learn which is the country this flag belongs to. Then there is also something else, which is the possibility for the sorting criterion to correspond to a numeric parameters. In this case, in case of a numeric parameter, what happens is that the value displayed in red will not be the name of the country, but just the value of the parameter that the parameter takes for that particular country the flag belongs to. Okay, a tap is wrong if it is not correct. This means that it is wrong if the value of the parameter associated with the tapped flag is not greater or equal, which means is less than the one associated with the last tapped flag. So in this case, we have Estonia, which is not following in alphabetical order Finland, and that's why this tap is considered to be wrong. When we tap on a wrong flag, the flag just disappears, and this is the effect. So there is no other effect than the flag disappearing. Game over happens when all the flags have been tapped. So this means that at the end of the game, there will be flags with numbers associated with them, and those are the flags that have been properly tapped, and the number represents their position in the ordering selected by the user, and there will be empty positions associated with the flags that have been erroneously tapped. All those flags have disappeared from the screen, and that's why at game over they do not appear here anymore. It is possible for the user to ask for a suggestion, and suggestion is not made by showing to the user which is the flag to tap, but it is made by showing which is the next value of the parameter which is taken as a sorting criterion. So in this particular case, our parameter is the English name of the country the flag belongs to. So after Finland, the next flag according to the alphabetical order would be Germany. So this means that Germany is displayed here, and the user is assumed to tap on this flag. But it is not the only choice that the user has. So the user can still tap on a wrong flag, for instance, because it doesn't know which is the flag of Germany. And in this case, nothing happens but what we already seen, which means that this flag will disappear and the suggestion will remain the same. Okay? So if I tap here, Estonian flag disappears. If I tap here, Germany becomes our third flag in our personal position. Notice that the suggestion is also the best possible choice, because if we tap, for instance, Italy rather than Germany, this is correct in principle because it follows Finland in the ordering. But then when I will tap on Germany, Germany will result to be wrong at that time because it is not preceding, it is not following Italy, it was preceding Italy, so I cannot tap it later. Okay? And since, as we will see later, the score is based on the number of correct taps, if I take a wrong decision, which is still a wrong decision, a suboptimal decision at any point during the game, I will impair the overall score that I can reach at the end of the game. Then there are hints. It is also possible for the user to ask for a hint. A hint is a complete run of the game made automatically by your device in order to show which is the complete sequence. And then you can just try to remember which was the sequence and try to repeat it. So when we press a hint, what happens is that there will be a semi-transparent circle which appears on the screen and moves around visiting. Actually, it doesn't move, but it just jumps around, visiting all the flags in the proper order. So if you are able enough to remember the entire sequence, you can just try to reproduce it as a memory game rather than as a geographic game. Okay, and this is also very useful for allowing kids to play with this game, because it will be very challenging for a kid to try to sort the flags according to some geographic data. It is very challenging even for adults, but for kids it would be impossible under a given age at which they are able to understand what the sorting parameter means. While pressing a hint and just trying to follow the trace is something which is just meant to exercise memory. Also notice that it is possible to build a customized version of this application which are specifically designed for kids. And in this case, for instance, even the sorting criterion can be useless just because it is mainly meant to induce kids to play with their own memory. Also notice that if we do something like that, according to the mandatory requirements of the specification, we still need to announce which is the challenge and which is the sorting criterion. But we don't need the sorting criterion to take a large part of the screen and to be very visible if we want our applications to be played by kids, which probably need the hit button to be very visible, because they will mainly use it. Hints can be requested at any time, not only at the beginning of the game. So for instance, if I have to sort these flags in alphabetical order, I could have tapped on Austria because I recognized that it was the very first flag in the ordering, and then at some point I will get lost. And in this case, I can tap hint, and the hint will appear. So this means that the moving circle will appear, allowing me both to verify if I skipped some of the previous flags, and most important, to show me which are the next ones to tap. Okay, let's look at the scoring criterion. So the score is related to the size of the space in which the solution is to be found. And as you probably know, there are 16 factorial, which is more than 10 up to the 20, different ways of sorting 16 flags. So there are many, many different ways of sorting 16 flags. And this makes very, very hard to find the proper sorting just by chance. So this means that we want to reward the player just by taking into account how difficult it was to find the correct solution. So this means that the maximum achievable score will be exactly 16 factorial. Okay? Then, as I mentioned, the first tap is always correct. And this means that when we tap on the first flag, then the score is set to 1. Then at the nth tap, at the nth correct tap, the score will be multiplied by n, where n is the number of correct taps so far. So this means that going on with the game, if we tap all the flags in the proper order, the result will be exactly the factorial of 16. While if we skip some of the flags and the flags disappear, they will not contribute to the overall score, and the score, the final score, will be much, much, much lower than the maximum achievable. Okay? Because factorial grows very, very fast, faster than an exponential. So this means that if we miss some of the flags, our score will be much, much lower than the maximum achievable. Then there is time. There are no limitations to the time taken by the player to sort the flags. So for instance, you could even browse the internet to try to figure out which is the next flag to tap according to a given challenge, which is, for instance, population density or whatever. But on the other hand, time is used as a scoring criterion as well, in the sense that the game is assumed to be played in exactly 1 minute. This means that your score, computed as I mentioned before, will be exactly as I mentioned if and only if you take exactly 1 minute to finish the game. While if you take less than 1 minute, there will be a bonus. If we take more than 1 minute, there will be a penalty. Okay? This is not the only bonus that you can earn. There are two main bonus that will be awarded granted to the player. The first one is related to the size of the set from which the 16 flags are taken. So in this particular case, for instance, for the Code Week edition, we are not playing just with 16 flags. We are playing with 38 flags. And we are playing with 38 flags because there are 38 countries taking part in Code Week, and we decided to use all the flags of all the countries taking part in Code Week. So this means that every time we start the game, we can find different flags, not only in different positions, but different flags. And this is an additional challenge, because the knowledge that you need to have in order to find the proper solution is much broader than if we were playing just with a minimum amount of flags, which is 16. So in order to take this into account, the excess number of flags that were in the original set is used as an additional scoring criterion. This means that your score at the end will be multiplied by the number of flags in the set that exceed 16. So this means that if they are exactly 16, nothing happened. If they are 17, actually there is a bonus of 1, which is nothing, because all the bonuses are factors that are multiplied by the original score. But if we have larger sets starting from 18 and going on, then the factor will be positive and will increase the maximum achievable score by, for instance, in this particular case, by 22, okay, which is 38 minus 16. Then the other bonus, which is related with time, is computed as you can find in this slide. So the remaining seconds in the first minute are used as an additional multiplicative factor. So this means that if you take just 40 seconds rather than 60, then your score will be multiplied by 20. As for the penalty, there are 3 penalties. The first one is again related with time, and this means that all the seconds exceeding the first minute will be used to divide the score. So if you take 2 minutes instead of 1, you will have a penalty of 60, and this penalty, as all the other ones, will be used as a multiplicative factor, and in this particular case, it will be used to divide the score that you achieved. Then there are other penalties related with suggestions and hints. If the player decides to ask for suggestions, which are the ones showing the next value of the flag to be tapped, then in this case, for every correct tap, the score is divided by 2. Okay, so every correct tap has the score divided by 2. So this means that wrong taps do not affect the score in any case, while just the correct ones are affected by the penalty, because are the only ones contributing to the score. And this is divided by 2 because it is less challenging to tap in the proper flag. And since the score assigned with each correct tap is a reward to the correct tap, then the reward is decreased by dividing it by 2 in case of suggestions. Then there is also a hint which has a cost. So every time we request a hint, our score is divided by the number of untapped flags. So this means that if we ask for a hint at the very beginning of the game, our score is divided by 16. This has not effect soon because our original score was 1. So 1 divided by 16 is something which is below 1. But at the very end, having divided it by 16 means that we will avoid users to use the hint in such a way that at each step they ask for a hint to find out which is the correct flag to tap. If a user does so, what happens is that the penalties will be exactly as the maximum achievable score, and the final score will be 1. Okay? Because the score will increase as 1 times 2 times 3 times 4, which is 16 factorial at the end. While in this case, penalties will keep multiplying 16 by 15 by 14, and at the end, it will lead to 16 factorial as well. So 16 factorial divided by 16 factorial will be 1, which is much less than the maximum achievable score. Okay? What's the best score? So first of all, we have a requirement here because we need the application to take track of the best score achieved so far by the user in order to allow the user to possibly compare the score with the best score he or her achieved previously. And in case the current score exceeds the best score, then this will become for sure the new best score, and the application should allow the user to post his or her score on social media. And here we have some requirements. The message that is used to share the best score in social media has to contain the FlagShipEU hashtag, and then it has to, of course, to contain the score and to contain the ID of the sorting criterion. The ID of the sorting criterion is something that will be uniquely assigned with all the official sorting criteria that can be used by all the games implementing this specification. To add new sorting criteria or possibly even new flags, sorting criteria and flags are treated as open data. And those open data can be contributed by any user, and this is one of the ways in which you can actively take part in this experiment by contributing not just in coding, but also in providing data or in inventing funny criteria, which can be then quantified and used as sorting criteria. In both cases, both in case you contribute by adding a country or in case you contribute by adding a sorting criterion, we need reliable data. So you are also requested to collect data for the new country, if you are adding a country, or for the new sorting criterion, if you are adding a sorting criterion. So you can consider those open data as a grid in which we have, or as a matrix in which we have sorting criteria as columns and flags and countries as row labels. And if you add a row, which means a country, you need to provide data to to fit the row and to fill in the row. If you add a column, which is a criterion, you have to provide the data for all the countries which are represented. Notice that we do not impose all the the entries of this matrix to be filled in, because it would become very hard and it would impair the extension of the criteria. But we need a minimum set of flags to have a criterion properly quantified in order to consider this criterion to be valid. So you can even propose a criterion without having all the data, and in this case it will not become official until someone else contributes to filling in a column. At the same time, you can provide a country. You can add a country, and if you add a country, you have to provide numbers for at least some of the criteria. This means that that particular country, which is just partially specified, will take part in the game and will appear just as a chance of appearing in the grid, only if the sorting criterion is the one which is quantified for that particular country. Okay, the official specs, which are the one that I am illustrating, will be officially published at the link that you see in this slide, which is flagshipgame.eu/specs. So you have to refer to this link to find the official specs and possibly subsequent releases and refinement of these specs. So the slides that I'm showing right now will be posted right after this presentation at this link, together with the log of this presentation. Compliance check services will be made available through the website to allow third parties to register their own versions of the game and to have them officially listed in the website, as I mentioned before. Okay, let's jump to the Code Week edition, which is the one that we are about to start developing together. So the development of the Code Week edition starts right after this presentation, and live coding sessions will be organized during Code Week. All those sessions will be announced on the roadmap page. The roadmap page is one of the pages of the official flagship game website, which is flagshipgame.eu/roadmap. Today, right after this presentation, we will have the first live coding session, which will allow you to understand how the other session will look like. So you can then check on the roadmap page to decide to see which are the opportunities of taking part in live coding sessions and to possibly decide whether or not to take part of each of them. I will also try to figure out which will be the focus of each coding session. I'm saying that I will just try to figure it out because coding is pretty difficult to be scheduled exactly. So if we schedule a session which lasts for 2 hours, it is not simple to decide a priori exactly what we would be able to do in those 2 hours. But video logs, tutorials, and project files will be posted on the roadmap page afterwards to allow people to reuse the code and to reuse all the materials. Most important, I expect all of you to send comments, to contribute with code segments and functions, or to develop in parallel your own versions of the application. Notice that step-by-step updates will be made available on Google Play to allow people to test the app. And another way of taking part in the experiment is just providing feedback, discovering bugs and reporting them, proposing improvements, or watching the application take shape in your device. The official Code Week edition will be released on October 16 with a message by Neelie Kroes during a wrap-up event in Rome, which is announced at this page, which is flagshipgame.eu/Rome 2014. This slide shows some of the ways in which you can get involved. And what I'd like you to do, first of all, is to find your own way of getting involved. And this is the first possible way, which is attending flagship EU events. This is already a flagship EU event. So if you attended this event, if you are attending this event, or if you are watching this video afterwards, you can have your name listed in the list of participants. The list of participants is available at flagshipgame.eu/join, where you can find a form to be filled in, where you have to provide some data, and you are able to specify the name that you want to appear in the list, and you have also to specify which is the role that you are playing in the development of the application. Then you can participate by coding, of course, by developing your own version of the application, by testing the Code Week edition step by step, by debugging, which means stress testing the application, by providing geographic data and contributing to the open data. And there is an input form already available to this purpose. So at this link, which is flagshipgame.eu/input form, you will find already an input form that you can use to suggest and to propose and to input sorting criteria. Then you can contribute by localizing the app. Localizing the app means providing some form of translation. You can either translate the labels and provide your own version, which contains the labels written in your local language, or you can localize the website or any other material related with the development of flagship game and with the crowd coding experiment. Also, you are invited, if you provide translation to the labels, to the sorting criteria, and so on, to share your translations with the team developing a flagship game in order to have your translation to be officially adopted in the official release of the application. Then you can also conduct a contest or organize a contest, which means just playing with the application and see who is the player who achieves the best score during the contest. And then you can promote the app in your country in any possible way that you can figure out. Finally, numbers. As I mentioned, there are 38 countries taking part in Code Week. 38 means that Code Week is not just a European event, because European countries are just 28. So we are proud to have 38 rather than 28 countries taking part in Code Week. And this means for our purposes that we will have to play with 38 flags. How many ways there are of taking 16 flags out of a set of 38? This is another big number, in the sense that there are, it is formally called 38 choose 16, and this is given by 38 factorial divided by 16 factorial and 22 factorial. And the number is the one that you see here. So it's a little more than 22 billions. So this means that every time we play the game, we have one chance out of 22 billions of playing exactly with the same flags we were playing the last time we played the game. So this means that probably you will never see the same set of flags appear twice on your screen. Okay? Then there are permutations, because as I mentioned at the very beginning, when you launch the game, the flags are displayed in a random order. So they take random positions on the grid. And how many random positions there are that the flags can take? The number of random positions is exactly the same as the number of possible sortings that you will find. So this means that even if you find twice the same set of flags, there will be let me try to pronounce this, to read this number, is 22,000 billions of ways in which they will be distributed on the grid. So overall, the number of different instances of the game, which is the number of different screens that you see when you launch the game, is this one, which is, let me see, let me try, 465 millions of, yes, millions of, no, I'm wrong. So 465,000 billions of billions, which is 4.65 by 10 up to the 23. What is nice is that this is the same order of magnitude as the stars in the universe, and it is by chance also the same order of magnitude of the atoms which are contained in a mole of a given substance. So if you take any element like water, for instance, and if you take a mole of a water, which is in case of water a few grams, you have the same chance of picking twice the same game as the chance that you have of picking the exactly a given molecule of water in this mole. Okay. And then there is the challenge, a quantification of the challenge. So given that the correct solution is taken out from 16 factorial, 16 factorial is the number that you see here, which is, okay, is that number. What happens is that, sorry, this is not 16 factorial. 16 factorial is this one, is 20,000 billions. So the probability of finding the correct solution just by chance, if you tap randomly on the screen, is this one. So it is very, 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 very low. So I do not invite you to, actually, I invite you to try, because it is, I think it will be pretty funny to see how many flags disappear if we just tap randomly. But if you want to achieve a high score, this is not the best way. As for the highest achievable score, this is the highest achievable score, which is given by 16 factorial, which is the best possible score, multiplied by 38 minus 16, which is 22, which is the bonus because of the fact that we are taking the 16 flags out of a much larger set. And then it is also multiplied by the maximum time left to get to 1 minute. This means that you have, in order to achieve this score, to play the game in 1 second and to tap all the flags in the correct order without any suggestion and without hint. Okay? Typical score is much less than 1,000. So this means that there is room for improvement for any player. So if we try to figure out how hard it is very likely that the score of a player will be below 1,000. So this means that it will be very challenging to try to improve, but on the other hand, what is nice is that there are huge margins of improvements, and improvements are huge, because every time we add a flag to the list of flags that we tap in the proper order, we are going with the factorial of the number of correct flags. Okay, that's it for the specification. So thank you very much for your attention. And now I will start together with you implementing the game. So I take the specification, and I hope you have them in mind. And probably we will need to go back to the specification during the implementation. But first of all, let me introduce the tool that we are using to implement the game. The tool is called App Inventor. App Inventor is a cloud-based tool which has been developed at MIT for educational purposes. It is a very nice tool because it makes it very intuitive to develop applications for Android devices, and that's the reason why I decided to use this for the first cut implementation of this specification. Notice that if you want to develop your own versions of this game, you do not need to use App Inventor. You are warmly invited to do so because it is the easiest way, in the sense that you can reuse completely the project file that I will make available. So this means that you can just slightly change them. But if you prefer, you can instead develop from scratch your own version, even targeting different platforms, or using, if you are already a coder, a programmer, you can use your own preferred environment to develop your own application. Okay. Now, as you can see, I'm not starting really from scratch. The reason why I'm not starting from scratch, but I'm starting from something which is already here, is that I started implementing this game before the disclosure of the specification. But I was fair enough in the sense that I did it not just because I knew in advance the specification, but because I developed just a stub of the application which has nothing to do with the specification. I did it just to put it on the Google Play Store and to allow people to start downloading the application and to have a first version of the application installed on their device in order to then update that version to see the game take shape. Okay, so this was the idea, and the application we start from, the version we start from, is exactly the one that I developed in the last week, and all the design steps of this first cut application are completely documented online by the video logs of the implementation that I did. So you can follow even that very first steps to possibly re-implement your application from scratch, or otherwise you can decide at which point to jump into the project by taking the project file and starting from that point. So I have also to introduce something else, which is an emulator. But before introducing the emulator that I'm using, which is called Genymotion, let me show you how you can test what you are doing in App Inventor while developing the application. So there are two different commands here. One is called connect and the other is called build. So connect contains several options. The first one is App Inventor Companion. App Inventor Companion is an application which, an Android application that you can install on your Android device, which allows you to synchronize with the cloud version of the environment in order to be able to see on the screen of your Android device directly the effect of all the changes that you are making on the development environment. So this is very, very useful because every time you change something here, you can directly see the effect on the screen of your device. So in practice is like having the application already installed in your device and updated every time you change a piece of code or an image or whatever in the interface. So this is very, very useful. I cannot show you right now this just because I'm not sharing the screen of my Android device. So that's why I'm not using this function. Then there is an emulator. This emulator is not the one that I'm using, but it is an emulator directly provided within the environment. And the reason why I'm not using it is because it does not allow me to magnify the screen, and the resolution would be too low in order to allow you to really appreciate the effects of what we are doing. Then there are USB connection to the Android device, which does something which is pretty similar to the application companion. And then there is this other option, which is build. Build means not testing, but actually building the application. So this means that once we have defined the interface and the code that provides the functionalities, we can really build an application. And Android applications are distributed as APK. This is the extension of the files that you can find in the Google Play Store, or can be installed on your device following other paths. There are two ways of building this application. The first one, in both cases, the application is built on the server. So first of all, notice that you do not need to have anything installed on your personal computer, but a web browser, because this is a cloud service which is accessible through a web browser at this address. I didn't mention that when you try to gain access to this link, you have to log in. And the reason why you need to log in is because all your projects will then saved in your name. So you need to provide an account, a valid account, in order to have your projects stored in your own space in cloud. And to this purpose, you need, in particular, a Google account. I don't know if you already have one, but if you don't, a Google account can be created in a couple of minutes. So this is not a bottleneck. Okay. So being a tool which is completely based on cloud, even for building the application, not only for designing it, you can rely on the server made available by MIT. So in any case, the build will be done at MIT. And then there are two different ways in which the application can be provided to you. The first one is this one. So the application is built remotely, and then a QR code is provided that can be captured by your smartphone as any QR code or any barcode. And if you capture the barcode leads you to a link from where the APK can be downloaded and installed on your device. Okay, right now I'm showing you the QR code, and you can even try to capture it if you are following this presentation live, because at this time the APK is available on the server. Once we start downloading it after a few minutes, or actually not few minutes, 2 hours, it will be removed. So you should be able right now to install this version on your device just by capturing this QR code. In any case, this is not, once again, the way in which I will test the application on my personal computer today, because I need to use the emulator. And to use the emulator, I build the application and I save the APK to my own computer. Let's see what happens. It will take exactly the same time actually not exactly the same time, because the build time depends also on the congestion of the server and on the network, but there is this progress bar which shows me that it takes just a few seconds, and then the flagship APK is being downloaded in the download folder in my PC. And this is the APK. Now let me go back to the emulator, which is Genymotion. If I take the APK file from here, I can drag and drop it here to have it installed and launched automatically in the emulator. And this is the preliminary version that we developed together. So I can press play the game to gain access to the second screen, which does not lead to the game because the game has to be implemented. But there are a few animations that we added here. So pressing here the EU mouse starts moving the tail. If I press it again, it starts moving around. If I press it again, it stops, and then it stops the tail. So those are just fancy animations that we added just to make this preliminary version doing something. And this will be our first page. So we do not focus anymore on the first page of the application for the CodeWeek edition. This is the first page, which is compliant with our specification. And then we will focus on the play the game part. So what play the game did before was just inviting you to take part in this experiment as you are doing today. And there is also an automatic translation service. Right now I set Italian as a default language for my version of the emulator, just to test the translation. The translation is not really good Italian, but it is good enough to allow Italian people to understand what this message says. And what is nice with these translations is that it is able to translate in almost all languages. And it is done by a service which is provided by Android. So this means that looking back at the log of the development of this preliminary version, you will learn how to use this service to make automatic translations in your own applications, even if they are not FlagShip game. Then there are two other buttons here. One is join, which leads to the website, to the official page of the website. And the other one, okay, let me try to go back. Where is it? Okay, no, I'm not. Okay, and the other is share, which allows me in this case to share it with in social networks and with friends. The reason why I do not see many sharing options here is just because I'm using an emulator where I have no social media accounts. But if you run it on your, even this version on your Android device, you will find here all the options that you usually have available when you share something. Okay. We can go back and even close the application because right now we need to start implementing the specification. So this was just to illustrate which is our starting point and to invite you to follow the previous steps of the development. Right now we move to the second screen, which is this one. For those of you who have not followed the previous steps and are not familiar with App Inventor, we can specify here how many screens as we need. And the first screen is always called screen 1 by default. And this is the main page that shows up when you launch the application. Then you can assign any other name to all other screens that are second, third, or whatever screens. The screen, which is the main screen for our application, in which the application will, the game will be played, is called the gameplay. And this is how it looks like according to the original version of the application we are using as a starting point. Notice that here we find something which resembles the screen of the Android device in which the application will be executed. So what I can do in this screen is to design the interface. So all the interface elements can be taken from here, dragged and dropped here in order to design the interface. And this is what we are going to do right now, because we need, first of all, to provide an interface for the game which is as close as possible to the mock-up that I presented during the presentation. However, before designing the interface, I need to get rid, to remove the interface elements that I used in the stub application. So for instance, I do not need any invitation message. I do not need a join, translate, and share button, so I can read almost of everything here. And notice that the elements are the components that are already in the interface are listed here, are not only shown to some extent here, but are also listed here. So to remove them, I have to go here and select the ones that I want to remove, and then I can either press remove or press the delete key on my keyboard. So, oops, sorry, I pressed on rename. Delete is this one. Okay, this is the effect. You see, right now I have an empty screen to play with. Then there are other elements which do not appear here in the screen, but appear here. Why? Just because they are interface elements which are not visible. Let's have a look at the elements that I used in the previous version. Text-to-speech is an interface element, the one which allowed our previous application to pronounce the invitation. Then sharing is the element which allows us to exploit the sharing services made available by Android. Then activity starter, which is the one which allowed me to open up a web page for implementing the join functionality. And then the Yandex Translate, which is the automatic translation service made available by Android. I do not need any of them, so I will remove them and start from scratch. Okay, now we are really ready to start. And to show you how the interface looks like at the very beginning when you open up App Inventor, it looks like this. So there is not only an empty but a white page where you can design your interface. And to design the interface, you have all these elements you see: button, checkbox, data picker, images, and so on. And then many other elements that you can find in other panels, like layout elements, which allow you to organize either as a table or horizontally or vertically the interface elements that you are putting here. Then you have media elements. You see there are many ones, including text-to-speech and the Yandex Translate. But you can also take control of your camera, of your camcorder, of your player, of the sounds, and so on. Then drawing and animations, and in particular we will use a canvas, where a canvas is a space in which we can draw or put images. And then there is image sprite. Image sprite is an image that can be moved around on a canvas. And we will use image sprites to represent flags and also to represent other objects, like, for instance, the circle that will be used for hints. Then there are sensors, social, and here is the sharing function that we used in the previous version. Then storage, that will be used to store the score of the player. Then connectivity, and here we find the activity starter that we used in the previous version, and then even Lego and Mindstorms to do some robotics. So to connect possibly your smartphone to some Lego robotics. Now, let's go back to what we need to do right now. And I want to show you another panel in this interface, which is the media panel, which is shown here at the bottom. If I scroll it down, I can find many media elements already uploaded here. I did it just because it is quite boring to upload all the 38 flags that we need to use. So in order not to take time together to upload the flags, I decided to upload it and to prepare this preliminary version to make it easier right now to play with them. But I will show you how to upload a media element, because there is one flag that I left, which is the Italian one. So I go to this page here. By the way, this is the page where all the Code Week events are mapped on the European map, and it is quite impressive because they are much more than 2,000. So in this week there will be more than 2,000 events. Many of them will be also made available online, like this one. So please check this map, is events.codeweek.eu, and possibly decide which events to follow. If you want just to focus on Italian events, you can just go here and list all the Italian events and so on. But the reason why I'm accessing this page right now is just because there are all the flags that we are using listed here. And this is let me say that this is the reliable source of the flags that we are using, because as I mentioned, we need to declare the source of all the data that we are using. For flags, I'm using this page. And right now, what I need to do is take this flag, which is the Italian one, and I will copy it in my own computer. The name, as you can see, is it.png, which is good. And now I have the flag, which is the image of the flag, on my PC. I go back to App Inventor, and in the media folder, and I do upload file, which allows me to take any image or any media file from my file system. In this case, I need just to pick this, and I can upload it. And here is the image which has been uploaded on the web, on the server. Okay, now we have all the flags and we can start. To start, I want to show you the mockup of the application that we want to implement, and I want to comment a little bit on the mockup, because if we look at it, we can find many different parts of it. So the first one can be called header, and the header is the one in which we will display the challenge. Then we need some space between the header and the second element. So let's go and analyze the interface, the layout vertically. So I need to add some space. Then I need to add another element which can be called the score bar. I take some notes, as you probably need to do, or would need to do if you were implementing it right now. Then I need some other space here, and also a command bar, because restart and the hint are two commands, even if there is not apparently a bar, but those are two elements disposed on the same row. So to my extent, they are like a bar, even if the background of this bar is invisible. Then I need some space again, and finally the grid. Actually, not finally, because I have another element, interface element to be added, but most important, I have the grid in which the game will be played. Finally, I have some space and another bar which is called footer. Okay. Now, all these elements need to be placed in the interface, and their size need to be specified in order for them to look exactly as we want. So the first element that we will add in the interface is a vertical arrangement element, which will be like the container of all the other elements. Then all the elements that I mentioned will be horizontal arrangement elements, which will allow us to organize the elements within the bar. Okay? And spaces need to be declared as well. So the space has to be filled by some, or to be fit by some elements. So we will also need to add spacing elements to the interface. Okay, let's go back to the development environment and start doing so. The elements that I mentioned are listed under layout. So vertical arrangement is the first one that I take and I put it here. And as you can see, it assumes a default size, which is not the one that we need. So in order to organize my screen, I want it to fill in the entire screen. And to this purpose, I go and I could either set a size by setting the number of pixels, like this one, or otherwise I can say fill parent. Parent is the element in which this one is contained. As you can see, the elements that I add are organized as a tree because there is a hierarchy among them. So the parent of this one is gameplay, which is the entire screen. Then I will add elements under vertical arrangement, meaning that vertical arrangement will become the parent of the elements that I will add within it. Okay? I do the same to cover the entire screen vertically, and now I have an element which covers the entire screen. Then I can start dragging and drop the elements within this first panel, but before doing so, I want to rename it. Because vertical arrangement is too general, I call it just a panel to use the same name that I used when speaking about it. And then I start adding elements inside it, and the first element that I will add is an horizontal arrangement, and in particular I will add this horizontal arrangement here, and I will do as I did before by asking this element to take the entire width of its parent, while I'm not doing it vertically because I don't want it to cover the entire height. So in order to make it look as in the mockup, I could try to figure out how many pixels to specify. But I don't like to do so because, as you know, there are many different Android devices. And I would like our game to be possibly played in any Android device. So I cannot specify a given size because otherwise I risk to either exceed the size of the screen in the target Android device, or I risk to use just a part of it, not exploiting the entire resolution of the screen. So instead of specifying here which will be the height of this element, I will keep it automatic and then use code to specify the height. Okay? So this means that the design of the interface is not done just on this designer environment. I can design the interface once I drag and drop the key elements, even by refining them and defining them in the block editor, which is the part in which we will go and write the code in a few moments. Okay, let's keep adding some few elements, then we will switch to the block editor to start writing some code. Okay, this first horizontal arrangement that I put here, going back, okay, I have a screenshot here to figure out which are the elements that we need to introduce. Okay, in particular, there are two elements here. Let's go and see. One is the default challenge, which is this one, and the other one is the actual challenge, which is this one. So there is a default row saying that challenge sort flex by, which is always the same, and then the sorting criterion, which is the actual challenge, which has to change at every instance of the game. So to add these two elements, I will add a vertical arrangement, just because these two are not organized horizontally but vertically. So before having this, I add another element which is a vertical arrangement, and I extend its width as well. And then inside this element, I drag and drop two interface elements which are called the labels. Labels allows me just to write some text and to display some text. I can either statically decide which is the text that this label has to take, and I can do it right now by personalizing this. For instance, challenge sort flags by. And as you can see, oops, I forgot an A. Okay, the text appears here. Then I can also decide which is the font size. Let me set 16, for instance. I can decide the text color and so on. Let me try to change the text color to white. If I do so, as it was in the original version of the mockup, the text disappears just because the background color is white. So I can go back to gameplay, which is the screen, and change the background color into dark blue. And here is our text. Then I can do the same in another way. I could remove the color from here, and instead I could go here into the label and change the background color of the label. So I can do this way, and in this way the effect is different, of course, because just the area of the screen taken by the label has become blue. I ask the label to take the entire screen in width, and this is the effect, and then I center the label. And this is the first step that I made to try to implement the mockup, because this is more or less as the mockup looked like in the very first row. But I have to add another label right below this one, and this label will represent the actual challenge. So this will be called criterion, and here I could write alphabetical order. I could change font size, background color. I can set font bold to highlight it. Then I can change the text color to white. I can fill in the parent horizontally, and finally I can center it to obtain the same effect that I had in the mockup. Notice that the effect is not exactly the same for several reasons. So let's look at it. First, if I go back here, I can find that this bar, which is the one that we are realizing right now, didn't cover the entire width of the screen. And probably this is better than having it as large as the screen. So we will reduce it a little bit. But as I mentioned, we cannot do it in the interface editor because we don't want to put a static number in it. Rather, we want it to adapt to the actual size of the screen. Then we have also, we can also notice that we have no space between challenge and the alphabetical order, while such a spacing appears here. But the reason why it appears is just to make it evident that those are two different elements. But since we didn't add any space in between, the two will be not spaced at all. So this means that they will be directly adjacent, creating an entire region of the same color that looks exactly as in the mockup. Also notice that the color is not the same as in the mockup, and I cannot set from here the exact color, but I can use code to adjust it later on. So right now I decided to use blue as a background, just to allow us to understand which is the extent of these components and to see the writing on top of it. In order to make the code more readable, I will also rename these labels. Notice that this label is called the label 1, and the name of the label is independent of its content. So the content is challenge sort flags by, but the name, the label is still named the label 1. I want, having understood that they are independent from each other, I want in any case to keep the two coherent in order to allow me, when I go into the block editor, to remember what this label means. So I rename it and I call it challenge. I do the same for this one and I call it criterion. And then I have here an horizontal arrangement that will be used just for spacing purposes, because right after this I have to add some space. So I rename it in space 1, just to remember that this is an element that I do not need to modify apart from the height, in the sense that it is used just for spacing reasons, and it is the first one that I use for adding a vertical space. So the name just means this. Okay, I think that it's time to go and have a look at the blocks editor. The blocks editor is not empty. Actually, it's not empty, and it is quite a mess, just because there were many different elements that were implemented last week in order to provide the very first version of the application. And since I removed the corresponding interface elements, most of them have been removed because they have no sense anymore. Some of them are still there, and we can find them here. In particular, this is the text that was pronounced. We don't need it, so I just put it away. This is language. We are not dealing with language today. And then this is share. I don't need it. This is join. I don't need it anymore. This is translate. Okay. While this is our starting point for today. Let me see if there is anything else that I need to remove. Yes, this one, but this one is good because this is an element which tells the application what to do when we press the back button from the application. Okay, so this is the block editor. What we can do here is to write code just by placing blocks as if it was a puzzle, as you can see. So placing these blocks and connecting them to each other corresponds to writing code. And the blocks that we have are listed here. We have control blocks, you see, if statements, iterations, and so on. We have logic blocks, true, false, not, the logic operators. We have math blocks, which allows us to do computation, and so on. We have text, which allows us to write text, to join text, to split, to compare, etc. We have lists, which are data structures that can be used and that will be used during the development of this game. We have colors, which apart from the standard colors which were already available in the interface, contain also an instruction which allows me to make a color. Making a color means specifying its three fundamental components in the RGB space. So the exact values of these three components to obtain the official color of CodeWeek are those one, 68, 137, and 202. So in this way, I can define the color, and this is the way for defining a color. But there is something more that I will show you. That is the fact that instead of using this color to set, for instance, the background of the label, let me go here and see what I could have done. I can take this one, set challenge background color, which is an instruction which tells the application to change the background color of the challenge label into the color that I specify. So let's try to do so and see what happens. See what happens, what means that I can try to build the application, drag and drop it into the emulator and see what happens, or let you try it using a QR code. But this instruction by itself does nothing just because the application doesn't know when to execute it. In order to do so, I need to put it inside a when block. When represents a situation. And the first when that we have and we need to deal with it is when gameplay initialize. Gameplay is the name of the screen that we are developing right now. So when we go into the screen, when we jump into the screen coming from the main page of the application, then this is invoked. So this event is recognized by Android, which triggers all the actions that are written here. So if I do this, I should see my label change color as soon as I get into that page. Let's see if it works. So I can go up here and save the APK to my computer. And I can drag and drop it here. If I press play the game, here is the effect. As you can see, we have the two labels. As I mentioned, the two labels have no space in between, which is good. But the first one has the proper color, exactly the one of CodeWeek. The second one, no, just because we changed only the first one. Okay, so we used coding for changing the color of a label that we had previously specified in the interface editor. We can go back to the editor and change it a little bit using a variable. Variables are, in this case, global variables that can be used to do something once and for all and to associate the result of this action to a variable. So this means that instead of using directly this piece of code to define the color that I want to be assigned to this label, and then, for instance, do it again. So I use the duplicate function. So I copied and pasted this using my keyboard. I could have done it in this way, just right click of the mouse and duplicate. So duplicate allows me to reuse part of the code that I have just to change slightly. In this case, I do this, and instead of changing the background color of this label, I go here and I find the only other label that I have. So this is another feature of this environment which makes it fairly easy to do it for many different elements. But instead of doing so, which means redefining the color, I prefer to define once and for all the background color for my application, and then use the variable to assign the color to the elements that need to take this color. If I go here, as you can see, I have a get global color which returns the value of this variable, which is exactly the color that I need. I find the same here where I have variables, where I can find initialize global to add another variable, get and set to assign a value or to get a value. I duplicate it and assign it here. Okay. Now there is something else that I want to do, which is start parameterizing the size of my screen, of my panel. Let's play first of all with the panel. So what I want to do is to have variables which represent the overall size of the part of the screen that I want to use. So I define two new variables. And I call them game width and game height, W and H. And I can initialize them using any math value. For instance, I can take this, put it here. This is a constant, because then I want them to be reorganized somewhere. And what I can do is at initialize, try to assign to these variables the exact value of the number of pixels that I want to use. I take from here a set instruction, and then I do some math here, because I want to, let me find the modules and then explain them. So I will use the following elements, which are multiplication and rounding. Rounding returns the closest integer to a given value, and this allows me to multiply two numbers. And the two numbers that I want to multiply are, one, the entire width of the screen, and the other one is a fraction of it that I want to use. So for instance, let me take a constant to represent the percentage of the screen that I want to fill, which is 0.9, sorry. And here I need to know the size of the screen. So I go into this interface element, which is gameplay, and here I find many different blocks, including this one, which returns the width of the screen. Okay, so right now I can join these two blocks, and in this way variable game W will take the value of the 90% of the pixels in the width of the screen. I can duplicate it and do the same for the height. I have to change also this, and I want also to change it a little bit because I need to use more space in the vertical direction, so I take 95% rather than 90%. Okay. Now I want to assign these two values to the width and height of the panel. So I go into panel and I change, using code, the width and height of the panel. Set panel width. Seems okay. Okay, so I go ahead. What I was saying is that I can take this and find also a set panel height, which is here. And then I can assign the width and the height to them. Okay, we are now ready to try it again. So I build it and download it on my computer. And here it is. As you can see, it is now looking very close to our mockup. What we did was changing the background color of both labels, having the labels without any space in between, changing the width and height of the panel, and having this vertical arrangement element fill all its parent, which is the panel. Okay, so we didn't need to adjust the size of the label or the size of the header, just because they automatically adapted to the size of the panel. So having defined a panel as a container allows us to resize everything just because everything else is trying to adapt to its size. Okay, now the last thing that I want to show you now before going ahead is a methodological question, which is the usage of procedures. So instead of defining it as we did here, I could have defined the procedure in this way. I can take this and call it, for instance, prepare screen, because this is the procedure that I want to execute in order to prepare the screen in which the game will be played. Prepare screen is nothing but a container of a piece of code that will be executed whenever we invoke this function or this procedure. And if I go back to the procedure panel, once I have defined this procedure, as you can see, I find another block that was not here before, which is a call to this procedure. So if I take this, I can do something like this. Look, I can take all the code that I wrote here and move it inside here. Okay? Now I can put this here, and the effect will be exactly the same. The effect will be the same, but this piece of code now could be invoked even from other different pieces of code. While in the previous case, it could have been executed only at the initialization of the gameplay. So having put it into a separate procedure will allow us later on to possibly call this piece of code, not just reusing it by copying and pasting, but exactly using this specific piece of code without having to rewrite it, so we can use it from other part of our application. I will also show you something else that tells you what we are going to do. So I will create another procedure, and I call this procedure place flags, meaning that once I have prepared the screen and created all the interface elements, that I will need to randomly place the flags in the grid, and then we will have to deal with the control of the game. But if I have such if I had such a procedure, I could have directly called here from here. And the logic sequence of steps that I have to make is exactly the one that I'm listing here. So I need, first of all, to prepare the screen. Then I have to place flags, and so on. And I can keep doing in this way in order to split the coding task into subtasks that could possibly be assigned to different developers. So this is a completely general approach that can be used not just for our purposes, but in general. If you are working in a cooperative project, which is quite big, and even if you are developing code by yourself, it is better to use a structured approach in which you wrap pieces of code which are meaningful enough within functions, procedures, or classes or methods, depending on the coding paradigm that you are using, and then you can start thinking at how to use them even before having implemented each of them. So right now we are taking what is called a top-down coding approach, in the sense that we have quite a big problem developing the application in a very short time, and we are trying to split it into subtasks, and we are figuring out how to use the results of these subtasks, assuming that we have them, but we have not. So we can start thinking at a very high level, even before having implemented the single components. Otherwise, we could have taken another approach, and we could have thought at, for instance, screen preparation, and then at flag placement, and so on. And only after having developed all the pieces, we could have put all of them together. And this would have been a bottom-up approach, starting from implementing the components, the building blocks, and then using them. What is nice here is that we could even possibly refine some blocks without changing what we do at the higher level. So if we right now have just this prepare screen written here, we can, in our next meetings, our next live coding sessions, we can finalize the implementation of this procedure in order to have the entire screen prepared. But then we can even change completely the look and feel of the application just by changing this specific function, while leaving everything else unchanged. Okay? So that's it for today. Well, first of all, let me check if it works, because otherwise it wouldn't be a good conclusion for our coding session. We did just a little progress in our implementation, so there is a lot of work to be done. But on the other hand, I tried to explain step by step what I was doing, and also to tell you something about the environment. Notice that there are many very good tutorials on how to use this environment, so I'm not pretending to make a tutorial on the App Inventor, on the usage of App Inventor, but I will keep explaining new functionalities during the development as soon as we encounter them. Okay, let's check the new version and see if it works properly. Here it is. Play the game. Okay, and this is the result. So it's exactly the same, because we didn't change anything but the structure of our code. Okay, thank you very much, and don't forget to go and check the roadmap on the official website. Thank you for your attention. Okay, let me try to close Hangout.